Шановні колеги, ми дуже раді вас бачити сьогодні тут. І сьогодні ми присвячимо свою тему до прогресу, який здобула Україна поки що у реалізації тих умов, які передбачені угодою про асоціацію, імплементацію DCFTA, тобто поглибленого варіанту зони вільної торгівлі. Мене звати Наталія Shapoval. Я представляю Київську школу економіки, і для мене дуже приємно розпочати дискусію в основному проєкті реформ українських. І я трохи займався, але хотів би представити вам Олену Сотnyk, яка є депутатом Верховної Ради України, і в основному займається в парламенті питаннями гармонізації українського законодавства до законодавства ЄС. Дуже дякую вам. Я думаю, що моя основна робота присвячена боротьбі за євроінтеграцію в Україні. Але давайте перейдемо до наших питань. Прокоментую дві речі окремо. Наші процеси євроінтеграції, те, що в нас зараз вже є, які результати ми отримали, які є перепони, які є бар'єри на цьому шляху, і трохи прокоментую про процес лібералізації віз. Отже, основна мета, основні завдання, вони доволі такі суворі. Ми маємо за 3-річний період імплементувати майже 500 різних директив, запровадити і просто ввести зміни до нашого законодавства згідно з стандартами Європейського Союзу. І на цьому слайді ви можете побачити результати, які трохи... Давайте, я просто прокоментую, нічого не буду казати. А нам потрібно імплементувати, реалізувати майже 100 різних документів. Мається на увазі це законопроекти і директиви різних міністерств. Ми майже на 900% вже виконали на 2015 році. Основні сфери – це енергетика, екологія, особливо те, що стосується поставок, постачання природного газу. Ви бачите, різні імплементації мають до цього відношення і багато різних інфраструктурних проєктів, те, що стосується транспорту. І ці два міністерства, я би сказав так, Міністерство інфраструктури і наше Міністерство енергетики, вони були основними гравцями, будемо казати, цього року і працювали доволі успішно, хоча важко було працювати із парламентом. Все ще у нас є проблеми з нашими експертною думкою в комітеті і в парламенті стосовно комерціалізації. Що стосується DCFTA, тобто поглибленого і всебічного впровадження проєктів зони вільної торгівлі, ми просто підсумували основні вимоги, основні проблеми і виклики, які стоять перед нами. У нас багато проведено було різних зустрічей з представниками бізнес-структур і підприємств, і те, що вони вважають. Вони відчувають скажімо так, відсутність.
They believe that DCFTA is not so successful as of course they want, because there are not enough quotas to supply Ukrainian products. And what we decided? We decided to have communication on the basis of committee, how to renegotiate maybe some quotes, and we hope that we are going to succeed in this next year. And now we establish cooperation with representatives, and our main goal to increase proposed quotas to supply Ukrainian products to the European Union. And it should be, I think, the main goal for our Minister of Economy, and I hope for further cooperation with our committee and with business association and just different entities. Talking about dialogue between European Union and Ukraine, of course, it was long-term dialogue, and I believe that these 6 years, almost 6 years, we are trying to implement different technical issues in visa liberalization process. We really had a lot of different challenges, but we learned a lot from these processes, and our map of reform, it was rather widespread. The main one was document security, including biometric passports. You know that almost 55 million people, as I know, received or submitted to receive these passports. Of course, public security. It was rather tough reform. Integrated border management and migration management, and some external relations and fundamental rights. And you know that the European Commission positively assessed all implementation and all requirements to visa liberalization plan. And I think that the main reform within this plan was anti-corruption reform in Ukraine, because it was also one of the main requirements of visa liberalization. And really, maybe we don't feel too much. Maybe I, as a parliamentarian, can assess this maybe in more deeply, because we had to implement and to go through a lot of drafts of law in anti-corruption legislation. But I want to say that if you compare even Europe, some European very progressive countries, I believe that I know that majority don't have such laws and such composed of different bodies, anti-corruption bodies, as Ukraine has now. The main problem, of course, implementation. So on this slide you can see we named all new anti-corruption bodies that we have set up. Some of them now in progress, some of them start working. Of course, a lot of implementation in legislation. Illustration was the first one. Then it was very important state funding of political parties, and it's going to be enforced this year. I think very important, especially for journalists and civil society, was open form of different databases. So now you can check almost everybody about the and check the assets. And a lot of many things. For example, yesterday I've started to fulfill electronic declaration. Really, it's very hard. 40 pages, very detailed declaration, but I believe that if all the officials will fulfill, it will be very hard, you know, to hide something, especially conflict of interests. And I want just to say a few words about our new National Anti-Corruption Bureau. I believe that they are really trying hard. I received today documents, we have them in our procedure committee, documents about MP Anishenko, and I think that next week, next plenary week, we are going to just withdraw his immunity. I hope, I don't know, of course, the decision of Parliament, but I saw documents. So, and it is one and the main now result of National Anti-Corruption Bureau. They have 56 now different criminal cases. Almost all of them on the stage shortly submitted to the court. And even they have one success. They get back 1,300,000 euros to our state budget. So I really hope that it is a good sign of anti-corruption procedures in Ukraine and that we are going to succeed. I don't want to tell you some details about procedures in European Union on visa liberalization, because it is going to be a main topic of Andrej, and definitely he is more aware about this than me. So I will just get down to conclusions. I believe that visa liberalization procedures, they were very important for Ukraine. First of all, and I've told to Andrej 2 days ago, it was very important reforms, map of reforms, or even now it's fulfilled reforms. And I believe that we would never do this in such short term if we don't have this pressure of visa liberalization process. Very important, it was deep in dialogue with the European Union, because communication, I believe, one of the main processes that we should have, that we should to increase and to facilitate, because it is the future. If you find communication channel of communication with the European Union and bodies and particular persons, you will be more successful in Euro integration. And my last comment, of course, Ukraine fulfills the requirements. And now question if European Union is geopolitically ready to submit, and I hope that they will choose right way. But we are waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olena. Right now I'd like to present Andrej Plenkovic, who is a member of the European Parliament and the chair of the delegation to the EU-Ukraine Parliamentary Association Committee. As far as I know, Andrej is also the Croatian politician, and when in 2013 Croatia went through the accession to the European Union, he was elected to the European Parliament, so his experience is very relevant in this regard as well. Would you please share with us the European angle on whether Ukraine is fulfilling their requirements and what is the progress so far?
Thank you very much. First of all, good day everybody. It's again the pleasure to be in Kyiv and also here in the Ukraine Media Crisis Center, and I'm happy to be here in cooperation with the Wilfried Martin Center and the Kyiv School of Economics and my friends from the reanimation package of reforms, and it is a part of our exercise as parliamentarians to not only have a close dialogue with our colleagues, deputies in Verkhovna Rada, such as Olena, who is a good friend and who I greet, bye-bye, and thank you, and all the others, but also with the civil society, with academia, with interest group, with non-governmental organizations. I think this inclusive approach of debating Europe, discussing Ukraine's European perspectives is one of our key tasks. As you said, I have the privilege to be the chair of the delegation of the European Parliament for relations with Ukraine, but I also had the opportunity to lead the 2 observation missions of the European Parliament at your parliamentary elections in 2014, at your local elections in 2015, and as a result of these activities we have undertaken a very important exercise of increasing the institutional capacity of Verkhovna Rada, and I'm the lead member in the exercise together with our former president Pat Cox, who produced an excellent needs assessment mission report and with the 52 recommendations for Rada, and yesterday we had a very useful and productive seminar on the relationship between the cabinet and the parliament. So the interinstitutional agreement was on the agenda, something that exists and functions well in the European Union and tries to bridge perhaps some imperfections which are not regulated by the treaties or in your case defined by the constitution. What we are aiming at is helping the Rada to become a Europeanized, modern in terms of rules of procedure, in terms of the maturity and the level of the dialogue between the position, opposition, openness, transparency, code of ethics, and all other issues that entail the legal harmonization of the Ukrainian legislation with the European Union acquis. Yesterday I learned that some experts from my country, from Croatia, are actually working with your government and some partners here to provide you assistance in how efficiently and on time translate the parts of the acquis which are relevant at this stage in the implementation of the association agreement. This is from a point of view of the introduction. From a point of view of the political assessment, where does Ukraine find itself at this point? I think Olena's presentation was very comprehensive, and she emphasized, I would say, two major elements. One is the imminent decision on the visa liberalization. What it entails technically, it's a co-decision process, meaning that you need a consent at the level of the Council, meaning the 28 member states, and at the same time a positive decision within the European Parliament. The European Commission has, after many years of carefully guiding the visa liberalization action plan, and after Ukraine has fulfilled the necessary criteria, delivered its promise. Commissioner Hahn, who is, just as I am, a frequent visitor of Kyiv and an engaged friend and engaged commissioner dealing with the neighborhood policy, has done exactly what he has said several months ago. When the two remaining conditions are fulfilled, I will put on the table the proposal for the visa liberalization, and he has forwarded it to the Council and to the Parliament. We are now, as far as the European Parliament is concerned, in the phase of preparing a report that would deal with the Ukrainian visa liberalization. It is a competence of the Committee on the Civil Liberties, so-called LIBE Committee in the European Parliament, whereby the Foreign Affairs Committee, of which I'm also a vice chair, and we had a debate this week in Brussels, is supposed to provide opinion to this report. The debate that we had was of a strategic nature. I think that most of the political groups in the European Parliament, most of the key MEPs and experienced foreign policy veterans are aware of the political importance in terms of concrete and tangible effect of visa liberalization for Ukrainian citizens, but also as a symbol of credibility of the European Union in the dialogue that we have with Ukraine. And as far as I can understand, there will be a large majority forged in order to approve and vote in favor for the visa liberalization. Now, of course, there is the question of timing. The Ukrainian public should be aware of that this debate is not an isolated debate. It's a debate that comes on the agenda of the European institutions, not in a package, but in more or less very similar time frame with the proposals for the visa liberalization with Georgia, visa liberalization with Kosovo, and visa liberalization with Turkey. And the fact that all of these debates are taking place in a similar time, politically and mediatically somehow groups them together. That so much is not a problem, but it creates further connotations than just simple merits-based decision on the Commission proposal regarding Ukraine. Second item is that upon the initiative of some of the member states, there is also an idea to change the existing regulation by the way that a certain safeguard mechanism should be incorporated. And this safeguard mechanism would provide a faster and more flexible margin of maneuver for the EU to reintroduce the visa requirement if there is a clear and imminent indication that the conditions that were fulfilled before or the situation in the terrain is not the same in terms of a, let's say, serious disruptions in terms of inflow of third country nationals or other situations that would require reintroduction of the visa requirement. These debates are now parallel. The general change of the regulation is something that will happen, as far as I can see, before the individual decisions on the 4 proposals. So that might take us technically, because now we are already beyond the middle of June, and the Parliament has only 2 working weeks in July. So my assessment would be that the final decisions would be rather taken in autumn than now. But whenever they are taken, they will be taken in favor of Ukraine, in favor of the visa liberalization at the level of the parliament. Thus, it is very important to parallelly work with the member states, diplomatically, politically, also through the contacts of the NGOs, that all the capitals stick behind this decision when it comes to the visa liberalization, because bear in mind, there is a strategic debate and there are different cultural approaches to the issue. Those colleagues who deal more with migration, with justice and home affairs issues have a more detailed, more stringent the way of looking at the dossier than those who are in foreign policy and see it as a more strategic and politically, geopolitically important message for Ukraine. So with that in mind, I think that certainly in autumn we will see a positive decision with good effects on the Ukrainian citizens. That is one issue. Second issue is the implementation of the association agreement. And with this in mind, of course, we know that the association agreement is provisionally applied. We know that the DCFTA is provisionally applied as of 1st of January. And you are aware that the institutions envisaged in the association agreement are also working. I am actually co-chairing one of those institutions, which is the Parliamentary Association Committee, and we have basically two major roles. One is to oversee the implementation of the agreement, and that's what we did in April when we had our third so-called PAC, Parliamentary Association Committee meeting in Brussels with our colleagues from the Rada, and we went in detail in our conclusions, who are of course available on our websites, through the political situation, security situation, economic, sectorial reforms, humanitarian situations, especially of course in the parts of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast which are temporarily occupied, as well as the illegally annexed Crimea, with a firm commitment to the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and of course all the other sectors which are involved in the European reform agenda, starting from the constitutional reform, electoral reform, judiciary, administration, fiscal reform, energy reform, fight against corruption, the entire set of priorities which is on our mutual agenda. Our second task is to emancipate, and in a dialogue with the different actors in Ukraine, the entire European project. And I see actually our event today very much fitting in that objective, as well as the dialogue which we have had with a series of very active and very in detail informed non-governmental organizations dealing with European issues. So the association agreement, as we are all aware, in the ratification process lived through, I can call it a hiccup in the Netherlands on the 6th of April, which has unfortunately resulted in a result which was a negative result in a consultative referendum. And I hope that with the help of our Dutch colleagues and with smart diplomacy, once after the Dutch presidency is finished, we can address this issue and find a reasonable solution at the level of the 28 and in dialogue with Ukraine that would permit the entry into force of the association agreement and still in a special manner meet some of the concerns expressed in the vote of the very small, but that's what it is, a majority of the Dutch who participated in that particular referendum. And we will, from the European Parliament point of view, everything we can to help with the parliamentary diplomacy to find a way out. What is also important is a very good coordination between the government and Rada in European affairs. I can tell you the experience of my country, Croatia, who has two strategic similarities with Ukraine. One, we, just like you, had the unfortunate situation now 2 decades ago to have parts of our territory occupied, some of it for a period of even 7 years. And we have a lot of successful know-how how to peacefully reintegrate your territory, which I think can be a very good model in the wider international efforts to attain the peaceful reintegration of the temporarily occupied parts of Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, as well as the Crimea, because my line is always not to decouple the debate on the two territories. Second, this goes with the confidence building, trust establishment, amnesty, reconstruction, return of refugees and IDPs, social functions, control of border, involvement of international community, representation of minorities, etc. There are various ways of the models which have worked well. Second good experience of Croatia for Ukraine is actually our most recent, most fresh and most useful accession process that was completed with our accession 3 years ago. We will actually on the 1st of July celebrate the 3 years of Croatia's membership in the European Union. And from that point of view, the fact that the acquis is evolving, the fact that Ukraine has a very solid substantive association agreement on the table that goes literally through all the sectors of reform and all the sectors of cooperation that exist in the European Union, we can provide you expertise how to effectively harmonize legislation, how to strengthen the scrutiny and interministerial coordination within the government, especially with the regulatory impact assessment, with the checks of the ministries of finance, ministries of foreign European affairs, close cooperation with the experts in the various DGs of the Commission, because without the proper accompanying, it's very difficult to harmonize adequately the legislation. Building of institutions, and the key word often repeated here by our ambassador Tombinsky, to whom I would like to also publicly here thank for all the work that he has done for Ukraine in last years during his mandate here, in the level of implementation. Because that is the key, and that is what is being regarded and evaluated by the experts of the Commission and by the Member States. Also, from that point of view, it is essential to forge a political consensus on the European path. Only less than 2.5 years after Maidan, where we remember how it all commenced with the decision not to go along with the signature of the association agreement, this symbolics of the association agreement for the European perspective of Ukraine is like a phare, it's like a lighthouse, it's like an orientation. It's a sense of direction that is given to your country. And from that point of view, everything that we build around the association agreement is important for the sustainability of the reform process internally, and that can be followed up only if there is a clear political consensus that this is of course with the economic and social reforms, top priority in terms of orientation of the government. And I'm pleased that my friend, new Prime Minister, Mr. Groisman, after having done a very good job and cooperation with him in the Rada, has now, in terms of vision and the first steps of the new government, embarked in that direction, and that our colleague Ivanka Klimpus-Tsintsadze, who is the Vice Prime Minister in charge of European and Euro-Atlantic affairs, is someone who is fully committed, understands, and is keen to involve all the actors in Ukraine in a manner that will be efficient implementation of the association agreement and preparation for further steps. You can rest assured that the European Parliament, not myself only, but many, many friends that you have, will be equally articulated and audible on the Ukrainian-European path as we were in the last couple of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to invite Liubov Akulenko, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ukrainian Center of European Policy. Liubov, would you please tell a bit what your center is doing right now, what is important, and what is your view on the Ukrainian progress?
Thank you very much. Our role is very difficult, since all the times the task of civil society is to be like a watchdog and to criticize the government. For us it's very difficult to speak about results, because we get used to speak about problems. But today I want also to speak about results. I will speak about DCFTA implementation
And the first positive thing, and the first my positive message is that Ukraine started to implement DCFTA since 2013. We all know that DCFTA came into force only this year, but we started to implement it like 3 years ago, and there are a lot of reasons for this. Of course, the process of DCFTA implementation is more difficult than the process that has connection to visa liberalization, because in case of visa liberalization, we had a carrot. This carrot was like a visa-free regime for Ukrainians. In case of DCFTA, at the moment, I do not see such special carrots that can stimulate our government and our parliament to be inspired with DCFTA and to implement it very quick. But we are working, and the situation is really very difficult in terms of economic situation in the world, and this situation influence on Ukraine, of course, and the process how Ukraine is implementing DCFTA. There are two things that influence on DCFTA very much. These things are not new. First is deep economic crisis is in international trade that has relations to those countries that trade mostly with raw materials. I mean, we all know that prices for gas, oil and corns are not very expensive, are not very high now, and Ukraine is a mostly agrarian country, and for many years we were exporting only raw materials. The situation with low prices for raw materials influence Ukraine very much. Another option is trade with Russia. In 2013, Russia closed its border, and for us it was like a shock, because for many years, and it's true, Russia was our main trade partner. And in 2013, we faced a situation when Russian market was closed, but EU market was not open for us. And that's why we start to think what we can do as civil society activists to help our parliament, to help our business to penetrate the EU market, because we understand that EU market is very difficult. But now, after 3 years, I can observe some positive trends in economic development and in trade development, some negative trends, and after I will speak about implementation. Some positive trends that inspired me every day to push this DCFTA is, for example, now I can observe that we have some new, they are not uses industries, but they start to develop very actively. For example, textile industry. Today, if you walk on the streets in Kyiv, you can find lots of textile shops. I'm inspired very much, because 3 years ago it was like impossible to buy some Ukrainian clothes. It was like very bad mood, because Ukraine does not produce good clothes, and now we have lots of shops in Ukraine. They are good, they are cool, and I understand that our fashion industry start to penetrate to the EU market. So I am proud very much of our textile industry. Another positive trend is our IT industry. Today in Ukraine there are a lot of IT hubs, and they are developing. I'm speaking to, okay.
The fashion industry.
Yeah, I was impressed with fashion very much. Our IT industry starts to develop also very much, and those people who are working in IT industries, they do not feel any crisis in Ukraine. We have, I suppose that Lviv will become the biggest Silicon Valley in IT industry. So the time of crisis for some people is the time of problems, but for other business it's the time for new possibilities, as for textile and IT industry. Some negative trends that I see now in our economic development is the next. Our business, small and medium business, is not ready for EU market, because Russian market was very easy in terms of competition. It was not a problem to look for the partner. It was not a problem to sell the products, because we have the same mentality. Our business even does not think about packaging, labeling, and etc., because everything was easy. And now the EU market is very complicated. Competition is very high. Mentality is absolutely another. You should think about all details, about standards. You should look for money to invest them in your business, to implement these EU standards, and it is very difficult because now it's not so easy. Our banks are not so open to give loans for our business. The only decision is that EU now is providing a lot of help for our small and medium business, but it's one side. The biggest problem that I see now is that our business, it was so great shock for our business that I think that they need additionally 5-6 years to understand that they should start to move to another direction. Another negative trend that I see, and that it has connection to DCFTA and to the implementation of DCFTA, is that all things that are hidden in DCFTA, they are very complicated, they are very technical, and not all people in the parliament, not MPs, not all members of the parliament understand why they are important, and they sometimes are not ready to vote for them because they cannot understand the priorities. For example, our parliament can easily vote for judgment reforms, for prosecutor office reforms, but if we are speaking about DCFTA, they just cannot understand why I should stay in the parliament and not to go to the football matches. We now have the situation that most of the MPs go to the football match, and for us it is difficult to explain them that we should adopt some DCFTA laws. And I just want also to explain with what fields we are working in DCFTA. What is a DCFTA? The right hand of DCFTA is sanitary and phytosanitary measures. What does it mean? It means implementation of EU standards for food and agrarian industry. The other hand of DCFTA is technical barriers, technical standards for non-food industry. Another important thing is custom, the work of custom, because for trade it is very important. The very important thing is speed. Our custom should work like EU custom, but at the moment the situation is different. And another important option is antitrust regulation, because if we want our business start to think, what is doing our business? Our business is thinking about surveillance, because it's difficult to work in Ukraine. And now they should think about export. It's some additional task for them. And if we want to stimulate our business to think about export, we should think about also business climate and antitrust regulation. It is not all fields that have connections to DCFTA, but it's like 4 main pillars where Ukraine has to work to push this reform. At the moment we have good results. Of course they are not sexy. For example, if we are speaking about SPS regulation, in 2015 Ukraine received official permission from EU to export milk. Of course it not sounds very good, but 10 Ukrainian companies received such permission. It was like a way for 2 years, and it's not so easy to receive such things. For us it is like a big victory, because it is not only a green light for milk industry for EU market. It is a green light for our industry to China market, to Saudi Arabia market, and to other markets, because all developed countries understand that if your company implement EU standards, you can come to our market. So for me it is like a big victory. And by the way, we adopted a lot of regulation in this field. It is not so easy, but it's the question of survivals. If we want our companies enter the EU market, we should adopt a lot of legislation. We should help them, and we are moving not very fast like with visa, but like a turtle. But we are moving. Our victory is technical regulation reform. It's Ukraine. It's like a miracle. Adopted 4,800 standards in technical regulation. So at the moment we just forgot about Russian standards that are called GOST, TU, and etc., etc. It is our big victory. But also we have problems, and they are the next. The most difficult fields are custom reform and antitrust regulation reform. The very important things for our trade is to create all possibilities that our business will spend like 5 or 10 minutes on the border. I mean, for exporter, importer, does not matter, to create one-stop shop on the custom. For Ukrainian mentality, it is a problem, because if you come to the custom with your product, all people who are working on the custom, veterinary service, custom service, border service, they all want to check you to receive some bribes. And one-stop shop means that all this service will not have connections to you, that they will just receive papers by mail and control everything by mail. So for us it is not, for terms of corruption, it will be our big victory. That if Ukraine built a one-stop shop on the custom, but at the moment we are just speaking about this one-stop shop for many years, and at this time currently I do not see any results that our government is ready to start this, and to implement this thing, because it's important for our trade. And the last thing is anti-monopoly regulation. Yes, now we have a new team in the anti-monopoly committee, because if you listen to the speeches of the previous heads of anti-monopoly committee, you will be shocked, because every year they were saying how many fines they put on companies. For me, it's something stupid thing, because anti-monopoly committee should protect business and not to speak about fines. Today the situation is a little bit changed. Now they are trying to work more open. They are trying to publicate lots of decisions, because before they were like closed market. But the biggest problem that we have now, it has connections to the fines, because in EU companies have a possibility to go to the court and to ask the court review the decision of anti-monopoly committee, when anti-monopoly committee is putting fines on the company for violation of competition. In Ukraine at the moment it is not possible. Anti-monopoly committee is not ready for this reform, and the explanation is the next, that our courts are very bad, are very corrupted, and at the moment our courts are not ready to review the decision. But I am sure that if we want to implement reforms, if we want to stimulate our business to develop and to export, we should implement EU regulations, because for me it's the best regulations that can stimulate our business for trade and for development.
Thank you very much. I will ask several questions, and then we'll have a floor for everyone to ask. The question to Mr. Plenkovic. So you mentioned that there are challenges to the EU project per se. So what are the major challenges, and how Ukraine should take it into account, or maybe it shouldn't?
The key process in the European integration is the sustainability of reforms and credibility of the actors. That's why I said, if you want to be successful, the precondition you should ensure is the consensus of political parties and key political institutions, with always accompanying public support of the society and all the actors. And I think this is something that is present, visible, and strongly heard in Brussels coming from Ukraine. This is one thing. Second is the systemic issues. When you look at the association agreement, what does the association agreement do? It takes some parts of the acquis, which are relevant for this stage of relations between the EU and Ukraine, and focuses on approximation, focuses on creating similar legal certainty, predictability in your, let's say, investment environment, in your legal system, in your fiscal system, not only for foreign investors, but for the Ukrainian physical and legal persons and economic operators. So basically the idea is to create an environment where everybody is sure, if he has a business plan, that he will be able to do it from A to Z without excessive bureaucratic complications or any influence of potential corruptive activities or similar situations. The other element is the systemic reform of judiciary. And this week we had an excellent conference organized in Brussels together of my delegation and the Committee on Legal Affairs, where your Minister of Justice was, where your new public prosecutor was, people from Rada, people from presidential administration, influential people in the various committees on the appointment on judges, and we understood how this judiciary reform and fight against corruption are high on the agenda of the reform process in Ukraine. This is perhaps the biggest test, the biggest challenge. Parallelly to that, we need to see how the overall overhaul of the Ukrainian administration is done to live up to the challenges of the European integration. Whether it's having staff that understands the European issues, policies, dossiers, whether it's having educated people who speak enough foreign languages, who are dealing with the dossiers and linking what's going on in Ukraine with this, what's happening at the European Union level, it is also a very important structural process of change. The other thing as a major challenge is always to understand the wider European context. That is important. That is something that is sometimes neglected in the process of getting closer to the European Union, because this context, whether you like it or not, always has an impact of these type of policies. And the context in the European Union over the last 10, 12 years has been very, I would say, complicated when it comes to the enlargement, when it comes to the neighborhood policy. You are aware that enlargement is not anymore as a top priority as it was in the 90s, with the 10 plus 2 plus Croatia, so 13 countries in a period of 9 years. We are now, let's say, in the consolidation, absorption phase of these enlargements, and therefore Ukraine should use this time to make very solid progress to prepare itself for the future steps. This is, I think, critical, because bear in mind the refugee and migration crisis, terrorism threats, financial economic issues in many of the member states, the debate on the referendum in the United Kingdom, which is more and more complex, especially after the tragic events of yesterday, creates a certain atmosphere that, linked with the challenges in our neighborhood, with the frozen or active conflicts in all the countries of the Eastern Partnership, with very complex situation in the Mediterranean, whether it's southern or eastern, where the stability in our neighborhood turned more or less into a ring of fire, certainly has an impact on the Ukrainian ambitions. And if one thing should be also borne in mind, besides this wider environment and the consensus I mentioned and the reforms, it is to keep the Ukrainian public on board of this project. This is, I think, the big challenge. We need to manage this debate of the European project, the narrative, the substance, the effects of the reforms, and this is where issues like visa liberalization are not only helpful, but are essential and concrete. And this is, I think, what the challenges at this stage of the reform process are.
And just following up, what would you advise to Ukrainian diplomats and politicians if they want to keep this constituency in Ukraine and in Europe of supporters of Association of Ukraine? How can they do it? What are the political, probably, messages that would help them to keep this constituency?
Well, first of all, if you refer to the fact that Ukraine is a victim of aggression, here there is only one simple message: just say the truth.
Okay.
We live in the hybrid warfare, media, internet, etc. But at the end of the day, people understand what is good and what is bad, what is a fact and what is a fabrication. And the truth, in my really convinced opinion, is the best way to explain it. And I think that most of the actors in the international community that respect it and understand it. That is one. And second is the credibility of the reform process. If you make a strategic decision, Europe is where we want to go. In Europe there are certain values, practices, legal standards. You need to adopt them. Bear in mind, when my country negotiated the accession, it's not a negotiation where we are coming in as the 28th member to the club and we are changing the rules. No, we negotiating how to accept what has been already agreed upon over last more than 6 decades, and perhaps to see how we can have some derogation in terms of time frame when we are ready to implement them. For instance, euro. When Croatia negotiated accession, we agreed to accept the euro. It's actually a derogation not to take it immediately because we are not ready, but we didn't have even a choice to say we don't want it. This is the point. So the credibility of the commitment is, in my view, essential, and without any hesitation, continuously explain what the European process is. Because with all the crises, with all the critics you may have, this is something which is stable, which will stay. We can alter it, change it, reform it, but that is the mainstream of our continent for many, 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 many years to stay.
Thank you very much. Sounds very up to the point. Liubov, another question to you. So, how would you explain what are the carrots of the DCFTA legislation implementation to the Ukrainian parliamentarians? How would you motivate them to use this instrument for the best of Ukraine and probably for their political career, because this is always a conflict for them to preserve the career and to do probably best for the country?
The question is very difficult because I'm looking the answer for this question like for 1 year. Since on one side it's obvious, the carrot for big business is EU market. If not EU market, it's a green light to other markets. And it's the question, if we want to develop our business and to become a prosperous country or not. But on the other side, it's only the understanding of business. How to explain this problem to members of the parliament, I do not know. And the only solution that I see is that members of the parliament, if they see a big pressure like it was in terms of visa liberalization action plan, that they understand that at the end that they will have a carrot for, it will bring a carrot for the Ukrainian citizens. How in case of DCFTA it's very difficult to explain, and the only solution is that maybe EU will found some carrot or some mechanism for control how Ukraine is implementing DCFTA. So at the moment I cannot find a solution how to stimulate and how to motivate them to adopt these regulations that have connection to DCFTA.
Okay, thank you very much. So I agree it's difficult. So for economists it's a bit easier because you can always say that so there is a research which says that in the long run there are economic benefits from the trade agreements. But this of course cannot go in line with the hardship which appears in the short run. Here should come Anti-Monopoly Committee and tell me that I should stop asking questions and allow others to do so. Please, who would like to ask something?
Andrej Megal, Institute of Liberalization, Ukraine. I have one question for Andrej Plenkovic. If I understand properly, we lost our chance to be a European neighbor fast. We lost this chance. But we also have war on our border. How can we enforce our political potential using the Guam, for another organization, not only European Union? Some with Poland, with former Baltic Soviet Republic. Your recommendation, please.
Speed of integration. When my country became independent, and we are now both of us in the 25 years of anniversary of declarations of independence, and by the way, Ukraine was the first country member of the United Nations who recognized Croatia. We highly appreciate it and we'll never forget that. What is the main point? You always have higher expectations than the reality comes up later. And I graduated law in '93. I never thought that after my graduation it will take us 20 years to join the European Union. If somebody told me that, I would have laughed. I said, no, it's impossible. So these are the realities. But the complexity of the situation where Ukraine finds itself, that currently part of the territory is temporarily occupied, contrary to all international law, illegally annexed Crimea, etc., with the international involvement in the Minsk agreement, with the attempts to reintegrate the territory, and with the parallel process of the association agreement and the European reform agenda is actually unique. Normally, when country is attacked, you focus on defense. You focus on sustainability of your budget, of strengthening of your defense forces, security forces, on patriotic activity that is there aimed at surviving, so to say. But you are actually managing two very complicated processes at the same time. That's not normal. For instance, in the 90s, Croatia had no contractual relations with the European Union. No 11 billion euros committed financial assistance that you have in this financial framework. For instance, Ukraine will get more funds from the European Union as a non-member from 2014 to 2020 than Croatia as a member. Just that you are aware. This is important to note. The level of commitment of the European Union in terms of technical assistance, political assistance, financial assistance, macro-financial tranches, various programs that exist, is really huge. It's not normal that for a country who is not a member, such a big involvement and engagement exists and will persist over the years that are to come. When you talk about different orientations, of course, we are all in foreign policy and security and diplomatic terms sensible people who turn around and look what's around us. But clearly there are priorities. I understand that priority for Ukraine is the European Union, and that is a strategic direction. All the other fora that can help enhance the regional cooperation, increase trade, economic relations, political stability are always helpful and useful. From that point of view, cooperation with the member states of the European Union that you have mentioned is, I think, excellent. All of them have expressed in many, many ways their solidarity and their desire to assist Ukraine in the European process, or the regional organizations such as Guam. And from that point of view, they can only be complementary to the main priority. And this is how I see the foreign policy activities of Ukraine. And in that direction, I always speak to my friend Pavlo Klimkin, and I think he very well understands the level of the order of the main issues for Ukraine today.
Can I make remarks? Sure. I just want to make a remark as Ukrainian citizen. For me, those facts that we do not have membership in the association agreement, it is not a problem. It is very good. Because without this membership, we can do that is good for us. For example, of course, I understand that I am working only with DCFTA, but if we adopt these standards, we can change our economy, we can change our country. If we receive, for example, condition to have euro in Ukraine, I'm not sure that it will be good for our economy. And I think that it is very good that at the moment we are not speaking about membership. Even EU market is very complicated for us. It's completely impossible to penetrate to this market. Now we have just free trade agreement. We do not have single market in case you become a member. DCFTA allow us to trade with all other countries, and EU standards will give us a green light to all other countries. So personally for me it is very good that we do not have membership now. We have a possibility to change our countries, to implement the best standards in the world, and not to have very strict obligations before EU. But it's my personal perception.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions? Okay, so just maybe if you would like to have 1 minute for final remarks, we can do so and just finish.
First of all, to thank you for this opportunity to ensure you that the European Parliament, European Union is committed for the European future of Ukraine, and that we shall prove consistency of our decisions and also expect equal credibility engagement in the reform process from the Ukrainian side. In all the contacts and dialogue that I had with the institutional representatives, I see this orientation very clearly, and I'm extremely happy that the civil society, non-governmental organizations, academia are strongly involved in that exercise, because we are all, I would say, on the same boat for the benefit of Ukraine and the European Union. Thank you for the invitation.
My last remarks will be that I am sure that Ukraine is on the right way. Those facts that civil society is involved is very good. Of course, we are always criticizing the government. It is our task to criticize the government, but we see that we are moving. The only thing that I ask always colleagues from the Brussels, that we should make pressure together, EU and civil society activists, on our government and to our parliament, because our title is moving, and I want very much that our title of DCFTA was moving a little bit faster.
Thank you very much. So I'm very grateful to our speakers for this intellectual discussion. And of course, I'm grateful to the Ukrainian Reform Project launched by the Wilfred Martin Center in partnership with Kyiv School of Economics, Stronger Together, and Reform Package, and also to Anastasia Forina, who manages it at the Kyiv School of Economics. It's a fantastic project. I'm grateful that we are part of it. And thank you to our audience. I think, good luck.